has always had a certain connotation to me. Despite the very straightforward definition of promoting the wellness of others, it's had a vague sense of the white savior industrial complex because I mostly picture older, wealthy white men. From Carnegie to Gates to Zuckerberg, and my generalization isn't so off base. However, you have to think of where we come from. So what is my perspective? Born in northern Wisconsin in 1986, I grew up with DOS commands and dial-up. I've seen bubbles burst and many other things, and that makes me a millennial. So from this, you can tell that maybe I'm weird, but at the same point, I grew up with the income inequality that President Obama has described as the defining challenge of our time. I always imagined a world where everybody had what they needed, a home, a meal, and a living wage, but obviously that's not the state of the world today. So, as the much older and wiser Dr. Albert Ruska describes, my generation has left a terrible mess for the millennials to clean up. A huge gap between the haves and have-nots, unthinkable gender and racial inequality, an insecure world, a despoiled environment, and the illusion of democracy in our own country, and much more besides. I hope that millennials will realize that philanthropy, as usual, simply will not get the job done. We need to discourage them as much as possible from thinking and behaving like their peers. He explains too what that behavior means, where we as grant makers act as arrogant elites, drawing arrows and triangles on whiteboards with no one around to challenge our flawed thinking. What's missing here is a certain kind of sensibility, rooted in the imperative that we treat people as ends, not as means. It becomes possible then for us to do things with humans rather than to humans. A sense of commonality sustains our social change efforts. Yes, thank you, Albert. So, the sense of commonality. I think this defines a millennial much more than a date range. Technology allows us to learn from each other much more than previous generations, and it brings a connection to us that follows us wherever we go. We want to do more than inspire shitty stock photos. We want to change what has been so broken our whole lives, at work, at home, wherever, and everywhere. Forbes found that 62% of millennials believe they can make a change in their local community, and that 40% believe that they can literally change the world. Millennials will make up half of the workforce by 2020, and with the population expected to peak at 81.1 million by 2036, that's a lot of idealism to bring to the workforce. So where we choose to work and what we choose to buy reflects these social tendencies that go beyond traditional giving. We buy shoes and glasses from companies that donate one pair for every pair that we buy, despite supporting a more unintended manufacturing industry, but that's for another 5-minute talk. The point is that we are leading the charge on something called conscious consumerism. We are changing the way, with our buying power and people power, the new ways to promote the welfare of others and make responsible choices and change the systems that have held so many back for so long. This new level of transparency forces companies to consider diversity and radical social responsibility as key practices to recruit and retain very talented young people. You can't get away with a blatant disregard for your workers or the environment like you used to. Well, unless you're Shell. But the sexist and racist practices that have persisted are going to come to an end along with the white male status quo. With immigration adding significant numbers to the US millennial population, we're becoming increasingly multiracial and multicultural. The National Equity Atlas shows here that 80% of the US identifies as white, whereas by 2044 that number drops to below half. As our population changes, so must our society and workplaces. A sense of commonality rather than superiority is necessary. And with that focus on engaged citizens and employees and healthy, vibrant communities where everyone is included in finding solutions to these social issues. So I hope you'll all join me in making the world a better place. Thank you.
Great job, Jill.